With a powerful heat dome gripping a large swath of the country, including right here at home, extreme temperatures aren't just uncomfortable, they can be dangerous. We want to welcome Dr. Brian Bossak, professor of public health at the College of Charleston, to explain the rise in heat-related illnesses, among other really critical information. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's start with this heat dome. So what's different between a heat dome and a heat wave?
They're very similar in terms of the actual implications for health and temperature. In some cases, a heat dome sticks around for a little bit longer. It involves like a high pressure system that sits over an area for a long time. And that can result in extremely high temperatures, especially if the heat dome persists.
Yeah, and your recent writings, you're kind of warning everybody about some of the heat that we're expecting this summer. It's going to be a hot one this summer, already is, when it's not even 10 o'clock in the morning and we're close to 90 degrees here in the low country. It really makes it critical for us to understand, to recognize the signs of when we should be out of the sun and out of the heat.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, with summer temperatures, people can get into a serious situation regarding their health very fast, faster sometimes than they might otherwise realize. And so there's a number of different effects that the temperature and the combination of the temperature and our low country humidity can have on people's health.
That's right. And maybe you can dive into that just a little bit, because I also want to ask you, what the difference is between a heat index versus temperature versus something called a WBGT, which I'll have you explain what that acronym means.
Sure. So I think most people are familiar with temperatures. It's hot, it's cold, it's somewhere in the middle, it's comfortable. And so often in the summer, we think of summertime activities, we think of going outside, we think of the weather being appropriate for beach activities, for swimming, for boating, for fishing, a lot of the activities that people love to do here in the low country. Temperature is important, but one of the things that we also have to deal with is this very, very high humidity that we often have here in the low country during the summer. And unfortunately, it's the combination of the humidity and the temperature which can lead to serious health effects. So the heat index is a way of approximating the interaction between temperature and humidity on human health. And that is because our primary way of cooling down when we're outside, we're in a natural environment, is to sweat. And sweating leads to evaporative cooling. I think probably everybody who's ever gone swimming has stepped out of the pool on a 95-degree day when the wind is blowing and said, wow, it feels a little chilly out here.
Yeah,
and that is because they're experiencing evaporative cooling. That's the way our bodies stay cool. Unfortunately, when the humidity is high enough, and it doesn't take that high of a humidity, in a sense, when the temperatures are hot, the body can't cool itself as easily. The sweat sticks around longer, and particularly as it gets hotter and more humid, then we run the risk of encountering very serious health-related effects, including heat exhaustion and heat stroke. So the heat index is a step above just thinking about temperature. Think about the effects of temperature and the environment, which is the humidity, on the body. However, it's better than just thinking about temperature, but it's not foolproof in a way, because it does not account for things like physical exertion. So if you're running around outside, if you're doing physical activity, your internal core temperature is heating up, as well as it does not take into account the effect of wind speed or being in the sun. So when people stand in the sun, obviously, and they feel the sun on their skin or shining on them, they actually get much hotter in terms of the temperature on their bodies. And it can be off by as much as 15 degrees from what the heat index says in terms of the actual temperature that's experienced by somebody who's outside.
That's interesting.
And so that wet bulb globe temperature, the WBGT that you talked about, is actually a step beyond the heat index to account for the effect of not only the temperature and the humidity, but also cloud cover, wind speed, solar radiation, so sunshine shining down on people.
What does that stand for?
It's called the wet bulb globe temperature.
The wet bulb globe temperature.
Yes.
How do you
indeed.
figure? What does that mean?
So it is actually a device that actually takes into account through measuring evaporative cooling how effective the body can be at eliminating heat. In a sense, it's giving more of a physiological perspective on the ambient environment and what that can mean for people's health. And the National Weather Service is producing experimental maps but they are kind of in process right now,
Yeah.
let's say.
Who's most vulnerable?
That's a great question. I've been thinking about this a lot. And so, and one of my particular areas of interest is responding to and mitigating against public health hazards, including environmental hazards. And I think in many cases, we think of vulnerable populations, the children, the elderly, but there are many other vulnerable populations. And I think heat risk, in a sense, for disease or feeling sick is going up over time. Even as the temperatures maybe slowly increase or we have a heat dome,
Yeah.
more people are susceptible. And that includes perhaps people with disabilities who are not easily able to move from a situation where it's very hot to a situation where it's very cool. That includes, unfortunately, sometimes people with pets
Yeah.
who are not willing to leave their homes and leave their pets behind to go somewhere and get cool because they think, number one, sometimes they can't take their pets with them because wherever they're going, they can't take them. And number two, people often feel like their pets are family and they're not willing to leave them behind. So it can, in some cases, lead to higher risk. And then the third thing is people now are taking a lot of medications, and some of those medications actually can potentially lead to increased risk for heat-related illness. I'm thinking about things such as certain antidepressants or other kinds of
Yeah.
medications actually result in it's not as easy to dissipate heat on those medications as it might be without. And so there's a number of different factors which can lead to increased susceptibility
Yeah.
to heat-related illness.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about, and I think we're going to be looking at our heat index in a much different light now that we've heard from you. I want to thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us and sharing with us this critical information, especially as we're bearing this heat dome right over our heads this very moment. So thank you again for joining us.
Of course, thank you for having me, and stay cool.
Stay cool, everyone. We're back after this.